All right, so I'm continuing our series, week 4, I think it is, of release. And next week we have, being Father's Day, we're going to be talking about releasing fathering. And then the final week is when Di Harrison is here, releasing the prophetic. So that's going to be interesting. But today, it's my mandate to talk to you about releasing generosity. Now, I want to emphasize that generosity is an attitude. It's an attitude in life. And I believe Jesus wants all of us to live a generous life. So really, we're talking about having a generous spirit. Proverbs 11:24 in the Message translation, it says this: "The world of the generous gets larger and larger. The world of the stingy gets smaller." They're not my words, that's the Bible, okay? You know, if you want more in life, then you need to live a generous life. 2 Corinthians 9:6, you know this scripture well: "Whoever sows generously will reap generously." And so to gather any harvest at all, the first thing you have to do is to sow. If you don't sow, you don't reap, because you reap what you sow. So if we reap generously, we will receive generously. Galatians 6:9 says, let us not become weary in doing good, for in the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. So I want to encourage us today not to become weary in being generous. Maybe you used to be more generous than you are today. Maybe for whatever reason you've held back from your generous ways and you've become more stingy. I'm only quoting the Bible, because the opposite of being generous is being stingy, right? Isn't that a great concept, hey? Isn't it great to say something you really want to say and it's the Bible, not you saying it? Let me encourage you to stay generous, because in due season you will reap a harvest. So today what I want to do is look at some keys that express how we are to live a generous life. You know, you're not generous because you did something generous in the past. Being generous is a way of living. It's more than a one-off event in life. The spirit of generosity should be with us continually. So, you know, you can be doing some generous things in life, but still not be a generous person. Think about that. So having a spirit of generosity means that you need to live a life of generosity. So, what conveys a generous spirit? And I'm going to look at 6 things. The first thing, some of these are a bit unusual, as you'll see. So the first one is your gesture. Now, you didn't think that one was coming, did you? About generosity. A smile, a nod, a wave. They are all being generous in gesture. I want you to think about this. Selfishness causes our gestures to be based on how we feel at a certain moment. But generosity is different. It uses our gestures to send blessing and to send encouragement. And the right gesture will confirm, it will comfort, it will encourage. And if you have a spirit of generosity, what happens is you push past your feelings, and your expressions lead the way to reveal what's in your heart. How many of you know that you might be generous in your heart and loving in your heart, but you don't feel like showing it on one particular day for whatever reason? So your heart will follow the release of your expression. Some people think that they're being false, and if they don't feel like greeting somebody by smiling and saying, "Good morning," because actually, for you, it might not be a good morning. It might be a terrible morning. You might have had a car accident or a row with your spouse on the way in or something, and it's been a bad day so far, and you're not feeling good. And so to actually put a smile on your face, and somebody says, very often we say, how are you? Are you all right? And it's almost a saying these days. But actually, do we mean that? And how do we respond to that? And sometimes you don't feel like you want to say, yes, I'm great, thank you very much. You hear what I'm saying? If you push past your emotions and your feelings, that is showing a generous heart. I'm not talking about being false, but I'm talking about the other side of being generous. So by a little bit of further effort, we can push past through a mood. How many of you have moods? Mood swings. And the expression of generosity causes us to find our heart. And that's when you find value. It's when you find optimism, when you do those things. And you will be amazed at what you can do when you push through those barriers when you're in a mood on a given moment. It's amazing what you can do. Last week and a couple of weeks before that, we've seen those terrible events of terrorism in London and Manchester. Horrific, weren't they? And I've been reading reports and listening to different things, and it's interesting how even in the act of terrorism last week in London, in the middle of that horrific and tragic event, where innocent people were senselessly killed, we find acts of heroism. Stories have emerged of how people fought to defend those who were being attacked. People they didn't even know. Amazing heroics. We can show acts of bravery and be generous at times like that, and yet then at other times, we can walk down the street and pass by people without a smile or a nod, or kind of interesting, isn't it? Not even a greeting. And that conflict we all have in life. Now, I'm not saying that we've got to walk around everywhere grinning like a Cheshire cat. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, push through the mood swings and be generous in your spirit. Be generous in your gestures. Don't get too defensive about what I'm trying to say, because if you're not normally generous in your gesture, understand that I'm suggesting there is a higher level of generosity in conducting yourself in a different way. Smile. If you smile at somebody, what happens? There you go. Show that you are happy. That's being generous in stature. It's interesting. I've noticed, we've seen it all with our kids. They change. Children develop and change as they get older. I won't tell you which one. One of our 4 children in particular was very exuberant, happy, and over the top with his expression. That's whittled it down to 2. So Leah, you're safe. That's whittled it down to 2. I'm not telling you which one it is. And then suddenly, when getting into the teenage years, it all changed. So that it seems like most teenagers, when they get to 14, it's, cool. How you doing? How's it going? Right on. Right. Whereas before, as a kid, they'd be going, oh, great, Dad, you know what happened? It's like fantastic. But these days, when you get to 14, you get into your teens, and you're walking down the stairs, morning. It's just a grunt. Do you know why? They think they've suddenly matured. You're laughing because you know what it's like, don't you? It's true. Remember, what you give comes back to you. It's interesting that the children's expression are genuine as soon as they think they mature. And then their expressions can close up. Actually, do you know what? We as a church are an expression-filled church by design. It's not false, it's genuine. And it's a way to be generous. Now, we're noted as being a friendly church. Actually, that's great. We need to continue to do that. That's one level. We need to go to a different level of building relationships in a way that I think we're not doing as well as we ought. But it's a way to be generous. In worship, be generous. Sing. Clap your hands. We sung a song this morning about lifting your hands. I don't know how. I was sitting on the front row, so I don't know what was happening. I don't know how anybody can sing a song, I will lift my hands and keep them down. What's that about? Am I thick or what? Lift your hands. I remember when I was 17 and I went into the ministry as a junior minister, and Ray Belfield, the senior leader, the pastor of the church, was discipling me. And his first comment on the first weekend, we used to sing in those days out of the Redemption hymnal. And that's a hymn book that we used to use in the Assemblies of God. And at my hymn book, I bought one of these leather-bound ones, so it was my own copy. It was a music copy. Played the piano a bit and stuff. So I used to, but being a teenager, the in thing to do was to hold it in one hand with your hand in your pocket. So I'd be singing like this. The first comment Ray Belfield said to me was, okay, Phil, now you're here in Wigan. We're going to train you for the ministry. The first thing he said is, I don't ever want to see your hands in your pockets ever again. Do you know, I've never forgotten that. You will never see me with my hands in my pockets when I'm in worship. Because I think God deserves more. I believe that we need to be full of expression. It's being generous in our response, in our gesture, even in worship. Right? If you bottle everything up, then you will naturally turn inwardly, which causes your life to be less filled with the good things that are around you. Okay, the second key is generous in judgment. Matthew 7, 1-4, do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the same measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look for the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? That text is self-explanatory, isn't it? But Jesus is saying, don't judge other people. Most people do this, and do so when they make judgments, they do it because they've made an assumption. Most judgments are made because of assumptions. My cousin told me a story quite a long time ago now about his two neighbors. And he told me the story about one of the neighbors was away on holiday, and the other neighbor had the key to look after the house, kept going into the house and so on. And he had an Alsatian dog, and so that was his, but the guy that was looking after the house, so he'd be going in the house and taking care of it. Well, 2 days before the neighbor came back from holiday, he was in his house, and his pet dog walked into the house with next door's rabbit in its mouth, dead. So this guy thought, oh dear, it was bloody and mucky, and so he thought, oh dear, and he was mad at the dog. How did the rabbit must have got out, the dog got it and killed the rabbit. So he thought, what am I going to do? So he washed the rabbit, cleaned it up, went back in the house, put it in the hutch, And so, neighbor came back from holiday, went round, everything okay, and they were beside themselves that their pet rabbit had died. And so he said, what's the matter? He says, He said, I'm gutted. Our pet rabbit's died. Oh, he says, I'm so sorry to hear that. Keeping a straight face. He says, yeah, but the problem is I don't understand. He said, just before we went on holiday, it died and I buried it in the garden. Now it's back in the hutch. Clean. See, the neighbor had made an assumption that his dog had killed the rabbit. When you hear about what somebody else has said or done, or they act, be careful not to judge. Because most judgments are made based on assumptions. The point here is when dealing with other people, harsh judgment is often usually made with wrong assumptions. Assumptions are what we assume to be true without the evidence to support. In other words, real evidence. And I'm not talking about those of you who think you've got natural intuition, you're intuitive, and you've got that ability to read people. I've heard some people say, I know she's done that. I know it. I know. No, you don't know. You're assuming something. Assumptions are dangerously inaccurate. And we can so easily assume things about other people. So we look at situations and we make our own conclusions to things that are wrong consumptions. You know, even partial truth is missing the whole picture. And we all have to deal with this constantly. We all have to work at replacing the first thought with a better thought. And our human nature is that we are flesh, so we respond naturally in the flesh. But Scripture teaches us a better way. And when your mind is making assumptions, then be careful you don't form a conclusion that is going to bring a judgment. We can assume that people are ignorant. Oh, they didn't speak to me today. They walked right past me, that ignorant so-and-so. How many of you have thought that? Don't answer. It's a rhetorical question. I don't want you to show yourself up. Right? See, I'm not actually asking you to think about the ways of other people. I'm asking you to think about how you respond. I'm talking to you. I don't want people to judge me on an isolated incident or action. None of us do. Let's be honest, none of us do. It's simply not fair to do that. But to be generous in judgment is to refrain from passing negative judgment on others. And it's choosing the good side of assumptions that we need to focus on. If we're going to make assumptions, let's make them good ones. This is what generosity does. It assumes the best and not the worst. It's giving people the benefit of the doubt. It's maybe saying, oh, maybe they're having a rough day. Maybe they were thinking about something else when they walked past me and didn't speak to me. I've heard people say, well, nobody likes me in that church. They don't talk to me. So I'm not going there again. Well, you know that's not true. But you know what I'm saying? It's giving people the benefit of the doubt. Don't take everything personally, by the way. Before you say, incidentally, nobody is befriending me, let me ask you, why have you intentionally befriended others? Nobody talked to me. Well, did you talk to anybody? Okay. Be generous in judgment. Number 3, be generous in gratitude. Show appreciation. You know, the attitude of entitlement will always decrease a person's gratitude. The world owes us nothing. Nothing. And the way to get generous with gratitude is to take the generous spirit and say, well, I'm blessed with everything. and I'm entitled to nothing. That's the way to do it. That's a generous attitude. James 1:17 says, every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father above. Everything we have, we're blessed with. Thank God for what we have. Thank God for a roof over our head. Thank God for a job. Thank God for a family. Thank God that the car works. Right? Be grateful. You're not entitled to things that are necessarily better. And if you get better things, well, be grateful for that too. Say, my God is a good God. God does good things for people like me. Remember, Jesus healed 10 lepers, and only one of them came back to say thank you. That meant 9 out of the 10 weren't grateful, or they didn't appear to be anyway. Here's a statement I want you to remember. Have an attitude of gratitude. And the way to be generous in life and to have a generous spirit with gratitude is learn to say thank you. Thank you. You know, we all have choices to make. I could concentrate on the ungrateful, draining people who are miserable, critical, and negative. I can think about those who love and appreciate everything they have. Which one do you think is the best? You know, those who not only want to be blessed, I want to concentrate on those that want to be a blessing to others as well. And when you think about those people, guess what? Your gratitude and your appreciation goes up a notch. Listen, if you look at what is wrong, you will find it. But the opposite of that is the attitude of gratitude. You either look at what has hurt you or what has helped you. Look at people that have done wrong to you or people who have done right. I'd say look at the right thing. Have an attitude of gratitude. Be generous with your gratitude. Number 4, be generous in overlooking an offense. This is a teaching I didn't do this. This is all new, but I preached on offenses at the AMP college to the students a couple of weeks ago. And so it's really in me, this, at the moment. In Luke 17, verse 1, one translation says, Jesus says, it is inevitable that offenses must come. Now, let me say this. There is nothing wrong in being offended. We all get offended. The key is what we do with that offense. That's the key. And there are 2 ways to approach an offense through our interaction with one another. You either look at offenses or you overlook offenses. Proverbs 12:16, a fool shows his annoyance at once, but a prudent man overlooks an insult. Proverbs 19:11, a man's wisdom gives him patience. It is to his glory to overlook an offense. That's pretty scriptural, isn't it? Now, this isn't easy. I know it's not easy. It's very challenging to overlook what somebody has said to you or done to you. You know, our natural reaction is to, I'll get them back. I'll show them. And usually what we do is we go and tell somebody else, which is gossip anyway. We shouldn't do that. If you're offended, just forget it, if you can. If you can't, then reproach. We were talking about this in the week, me and Luke, about a few things. I understand you've got to ask for forgiveness and go to people. I understand all of that. But the majority of offenses can be healed straight away by you just forgetting it. Simply ignoring it, the majority. If I'm offended, and if I allow that offense into my spirit, then what happens is I become hurt, then I become disappointed, then I become discouraged, and then that leads me to become bitter and even angry. And a lot of people who are angry and bitter is because they haven't dealt with an offense correctly. They're carrying an offense. Well, I want to say overlook it. Incidentally, we are told in the Bible to, what's the word I'm looking for? To forbear, that's the word. Forbear one another. Forbear one another. In Ephesians. Forbear means to cover over so nobody knows. You see, what you need to do if somebody has offended you and you can't forget it, you go to that person directly, one-on-one. You don't go to anybody else. You go to that person, you ask them either for forgiveness or you say, look, I was offended when you said that. And 9 times out of 10, that person will probably say, do you know what? I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. I didn't really mean that. Of course, it may not turn out that way. But the reason why you do that is to protect your brother and to win your brother back. Incidentally, forbearance is not sweeping things under the carpet. Actually, it's the opposite. It's confronting. That's what we do in this church. We forbear. There are things that go on in this church that some of you have no idea because we protect people. That doesn't mean to say we sweep things under the carpet. No. We deal with it privately. We don't tell everybody else's sin. Aren't you glad that your sins are not broadcast to everybody else in the room? Forbear one another, right? I really want you to hear that and understand that. And, if I, as the senior leader, by the way, we need to make a choice on that. If I, as the senior leader, allowed people, what people have said either to me or about me, and it's amazing what gets back to me. Believe me, it's amazing what gets back to what people have said. Do you know what? If I let that get to me, I'd have given up years ago. There's not a week goes by when I don't get criticism. It's probably because I'm on the platform. So, any public figure, look at the politicians this week. They're in the public domain. So they get hit crazy. Just pray for them. Pray for those because they're putting themselves in a really difficult situation. You got to be really thick-skinned. And yet have a soft heart. And it's all to do with generosity and looking over an offense. I think we need to make the decision, this is what I believe, to have relationships that are uncomplicated. I want uncomplicated relationships. That's what I want. I don't want to feel like I have to watch every word I say to certain people. I don't want to walk on eggshells hoping I don't offend them or hurt them. There are certain people that get offended so easily. And that's being a man pleaser. And you know what? The fear of man brings a snare. You'll be bound if you live like that. I don't want to be worried all the time that people take everything I say personally. I can't help that, right? I don't want to be forever on the phone calling people up and saying, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you when I said this. Or I hope you're okay with me. Or I hope you're not upset with me. Do you know what? I can't do with that. I don't want to live a life like that. I want uncomplicated relationships. There's no way to live your life, is it? Being bound and worried about what people think and say. Now we've got to act lovingly and absolutely. By deciding that means that I am generous in assuming the best intention in people. If that is what I want from people, then I have to give it back in the same way. Let's be honest. People are people. Some things ain't going to change, right? But be generous in overlooking. Number 5. 2 to go. Number 5, generous with finances. Now, as soon as I've read this point 5, generous with finances, some of you in your spirit right now going, oh no, here we go again. He's talking about money. I knew we'd talk about money when generosity is there. Well, it's inevitable, isn't it? But if you're kind of switching off right now, that is a hint to me that you have an issue. Maybe right now you're switching off on this point and you think, oh, I'll just go on Facebook for a few minutes and when it's finished this, I'll come back on point 6. you have an issue. Jesus said, give. What did Jesus say? Give. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. You know, we want God to bless us, but why not think about giving to God first? Think about a percentage-based giving plan where you say that of everything I receive, I'll give a tenth back to you. After all, that's what Jacob agreed to do in the book of Genesis. And remember, that's before the law. Think about that. So you say, as resources come into my hands, I'm making a commitment to be a generous giver. And if you do that, I guarantee that you can expect doors to open, opportunities to come, and provision to come your way. You can expect new people to come into your world, new blessings to come, new things that will come into your world because of your giving nature. Give, and it will be given back to you. How many of you want increase? We all do, don't we? And this principle works. When you honor God with your finances, He will bless you. You know, God wants you to be blessed. So do it. Just do it. It's in honor of God. And when you are generous in your giving, what happens is the heart of God turns towards you with favor and blessing. So let me encourage you to be diligent, to be generous with what God puts into your hand, and then watch God work. Amazing. Number 6, generous with encouragement. Remember, I've often said that encouragement is when you put courage into somebody. It's not just a pat on the back. It's depositing courage. So your word of encouragement will deposit value. It will deposit affirmation into other people. And, you know, when you're encouraged, you know you can believe for all kinds of things. It does you good to be encouraged. Encouragement draws out potential. Encouragement restores, it heals, it empowers people. Nobody becomes their best without somebody encouraging them. We need to encourage one another, which is a biblical directive anyhow. And this is a huge challenge, I know, to some of you, because you were raised in an environment where you were never encouraged. You were never good enough. You were never thanked. And some people are bound, instead of receiving encouragement, all they ever received was correction for doing things wrong. You know, it's easy to correct people, but we need to encourage people. Let me encourage you to be an encourager of others. I think the best encourager in the Bible, other than Jesus, was probably Barnabas. What an amazing exhorter he was. You know, when you start to be generous with your words and with your actions, what happens? You receive what you sow. You encourage somebody, and you will be encouraged. It'll come back to you. So sow encouragement, and you'll receive encouragement. Sow those seeds to receive a harvest. You get the best out of people when they are encouraged. You know, cheer your children up especially. Encourage the kids. They need encouragement more than anything else. Boy, do they need correcting. But we can't be just correct. We've got to encourage. You know, so that we build them up. A pastor friend of mine said, trying to teach me some counseling techniques, he says, when you need to correct somebody, he says, the key to do it is this. You build them up, then you knock them down, then you build them up again. See, encouragement is more important. We need to bring correction. We need to confront, but we need more than that to be an encourager. Spirit of encouragement is a spirit of generosity. Let's have the band up. We should be the most encouraging people on earth. Did you know that? Generosity is how we change the world. Jesus told us to let our light shine. And generosity is that light that brings hope to the hopeless, and it brings light into places of darkness. We can change people. We can change the world by smiling, by being generous with acts of kindness, by believing the best of people, by looking for the best and celebrating those things. Let's be known as a generous church. A church that loves and doesn't condemn. Last scripture, Jesus said in John 13:35, by this will all men know that you are my disciples, that you love one another. You know, love isn't a feeling, it's an action. Think about that. Love is generosity. Let's not tire of being generous. Let's be generous people.